Welcome to HR Dynamics. We provide practical and positive HR advice and solutions. On the webinar today, Personalising mental wellbeing in the workplace for higher effectiveness.
So we will start right on because we do know that everyone is quite busy at the moment, and it does seem a bit strange to talk about something other than COVID. But for the people on, I will introduce who is here. So first of all, most of you know me. I'm Rebecca from HR Dynamics. We have another expert panelist, Mary from, she rolls her eyes, Mary from First Class Accounts in Maroochydore on the Sunshine Coast. Sian, I'll hand over to you.
Hi, I'm Sian Stimson, and I'm a ShaeWellness coach with PH360 in ShaeWellness.
And Dr. Cam.
Yep, my name's Dr. Cam McDonald. I'm a VP of Education for ShaeWellness, and by trade, an accredited practicing dietitian and accredited exercise physiologist.
Right. My husband has just been diagnosed with a chronic health condition and needs a dietitian, so we might be in touch after this.
Good stuff. I'm here to help.
Well, we might make a start. So I guess first of all, I'll hand over to you to introduce, and Mary and I will interject. I'm sure lots of questions. We're good at that. Fantastic.
I love it. So, well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on here today. The very clear intention that I would have for today is to make sure that everybody feels a little bit more aware of what actually drives mental health, mental wellness in their workplace, and understand how you can be a little bit more effective in going about it. And sort of drawing from our experience, we've now had 20 years of scientific collection and half a decade of really concerted effort in the corporate wellness space to make sure that individuals are actually living their best. And I'll just start, I guess, our purpose and our mission at ShaeWellness is to eliminate chronic disease and pain by the year 2050. That's our goal, and have healthy as the new norm. And I would just love everyone to reflect on this for a moment. If you had a world where we weren't talking about disease, just have a think about that for a second. If we didn't have disease, if we didn't have mental health to be thinking about, if we weren't worried about infections and various things like that, how would it change your mind? How would it change your interactions? Like that's very much the mission and vision that we're driving towards. And we're really excited about that. So we've worked with a number of organizations, and much of that started with research. And since then, we've now branched into research and a whole lot of support in the corporate wellness space. And so what I would love you to get out of today, in amongst the awesome interjections, will be the current state of mental health in the workplace, the effect of mental stress, and how that affects the individual and the organization, causes of mental stress and how it differs between individuals, and combining the science and technology to improve mental health and what we're seeing in this space and what you can actually bring into your organizations right now. We've been collecting a lot of data over the last couple of years on Australian, New Zealand organizations. And what we've seen is that 95% of leaders with 3 or more direct reports are at a moderate or increased risk of anxiety and depression. And 88% of them are at severe or extremely severe risk. This is leaders with 3 or more direct reports. We have individuals in the team. This is measured by the DAS-21 scale, a very well validated psychological assessment tool. Look, 75 to 80% of general teams are experiencing a moderate or increased level of anxiety and depression. This goes along with 1 in 5 Aussies are diagnosed. And for an organization, this is where it matters for the organization, 1 diagnosis of anxiety and depression costs 400 hours per year of lost productivity. The claims are 2.5 times higher than the average claim for rehabilitation. And the leave is 3 times longer. And while 50% of people will have rest and leave from work after a physical injury, 75% of people will have time off work as a result of a mental injury. So at an organizational level, mental health is expensive. And often when we're talking to organizations, they're saying we want to improve absenteeism, we want to improve retention, and we want to make people less presentee. And so what we know about these guys right here is that their 12-month lag statistics. To get an improvement in absenteeism and retention, you need to run a good program for 12 months and you need to have people engaged and on board from leadership down. When it comes to presenteeism, we know that mental stress and injury is the key determinant of presenteeism, and it's also the key risk factor with long-term absenteeism and retention. So if you resolve mental stress, then you start resolving the issues that drive absenteeism and retention, and you can actually see a really quick result in mental stress, which tells you that you're on the right track in your corporate wellness program too. So from a mental health point of view, mental health is related to the whole environment. And so if you don't exercise, it creates a higher risk for anxiety and depression. If you eat on the run and don't stop and just stuff things down as you go and you don't really give much thought to your food, that is also a driving force for mental health conditions. We also know that less sleep, which is something that we are all running on much of the time, is also a risk factor. You know that one night's bad sleep, what does it do to you? It reduces your energy levels, it makes you less motivated, it essentially makes you want to do stuff less. And if you persist with that for 6 months, you get a diagnosis. And this is essentially these lifestyle factors, not eating, not sleeping, not moving well, drives our energy levels down, and that then contributes to our mental health. And there is no question in the literature about that. We also know that work demands, work-home balance, pushing without rest, feeling like you're constantly just chasing things in between your next coffee, this mental load that we are on, expectations and judgment that we have on ourselves, social isolation for some people. This leads to frustration, lack of fulfillment, low motivation, and these are all things that then drive towards mental disease as well. And these things come out. Presenteeism. Someone who is experiencing all of this is going to be less tolerant and more irritable and more likely to have a mental health day and shout at their kids after they're being on their best behavior at the end of a really long day at work. It's like their quality of life outside also decreases too. This mental health thing is not just costing organizations money, it's costing people a sense of fulfillment in their life. And I think that's a very, very important thing to consider in all of this, is the toll that it takes on an individual to be going through this, but yet these things are related to things that we are in control of. So when we're talking about best performance and creating, this magnetic high performance culture where everybody's on fire and pumping each other up and motivated and all of that sort of stuff, when you have that's what you see on top of the water, it's a result of mood, effort, and attitude. You know that your mood can significantly change how magnetic your personality is in any given moment. We know that the amount of effort that you turn up to in each day is going to influence how you interact with people, your attitude, all of these things are going to speak to how great are you feeling at work, and this is a real representation, the top of the iceberg of your mental well-being. Now, as I mentioned, food, sleep, social life, like you can have a fight with your partner and it changes your mood. You can wake up halfway through the night with a screaming kid, it changes your mood, because that is definitely not your best timing to be awake. Finances, workload, how purposeful you feel, all of these things are the causes of your mood. Your mood doesn't just change on a whim, it changes based on the stress that's placed at the bottom of the iceberg down here, this environment. And so, but what we also know is that what is appropriate for one person is actually not appropriate for another person. And the best food for you is actually different to the best food for somebody else. This is where it becomes very individualized. And so just to give you a couple of examples of that, if we take someone and we make them do high intensity interval training first thing in the morning, and they've got risk factors for type 2 diabetes, they've generally got thicker joints, they're holding more weight, they've got pre-diabetes or diabetes, we notice that if they do high intensity interval in the morning, it actually makes their stress levels go higher and their blood sugar levels worsen throughout the rest of the day. But if they do that same exercise in the afternoon, they actually get a much more favorable blood sugar profile. If they do nothing, they get the gray line, which is better than doing the morning exercise. So I want you all just to have a think about this for a second. Blood sugar levels are a direct response to stress levels. If you put the wrong stress on a body, it creates a compensation within the system. It says, right, I've got to protect myself. How can I protect myself? I've got to store more fat, which is exactly what high blood sugar levels do. And so this stress response is very real for individuals right here. Whereas there is another individual who doesn't have this same risk of type 2 diabetes, different structure and shape and the way that their body works. They do morning exercise and it dramatically improves their health throughout the day. This is where we are very different. Exercise is a stress. You only need to see someone at the end of an ultra marathon to know that it's stressful. It is not nice and relaxing. It is a stress for your system. That wrong stress creates a stress on your body. But at the same time, the right stress can create growth and improvement. So we also know the same thing happens for food. We have someone who eats lots of carbohydrates and they get zero response on their blood sugar levels. We then have someone who walks past a bakery and puts on 3 kilos. The smell of those fresh rolls, and it changes the way that they retain fluid, and their blood sugar levels spike just by having a small amount of carbohydrates. This is why you'll see people do a boot camp, for 12 weeks and not change their weight because they're exercising at the wrong time. They are.
Sorry.
Mummy.
Little lovely, Sean. How good's home Zoom? We love it. So we then have this. So what I want you to understand is one food is not necessarily the same for different individuals. We have some people who have coffee and it blows their head off and they get really anxious. We have other people who have a coffee and then they go to sleep straight after. So this is understanding that people actually respond differently, and coffee for some people is actually a stress and can lead to anxiety if they're having too much of it. We also know that people receive information in a different way. Some people are hyper analytical. They use the front part of their brain more to determine how they're going to interpret information. Versus some people use the back part of their brain and they use more of their visual cortex. This person is actually very good at reading faces and understanding their emotions. This person right here is actually very good at coming up with logical lists, because this is the analytical center, this is the visual section, this is the competitive, I wonder what this person's on about because I've got to get an edge area. This is the, I want to listen to you and care for you and understand your feelings and be empathetic and compassionate. This is this area. And we have dominance in these brain areas that are actually coming from the womb that indicate to us how we're going to interpret the world around us. So things that are illogical stress this person out. Things that aren't pretty enough stress this person out. So we have these different things that create stress just by the way that we're going about our work. And you will all know this example as well. And that is people who are absolutely full of energy first thing in the morning, and people who are definitely not full of energy in the morning and come into their second wind later on in the day. We know that the way that brains are built, there are individuals that are incredibly cognitively alert and get their most work done between 7:30 and 1 o'clock. And then after that, they fall off a cliff and they don't really want to talk to anybody. However, we have these individuals here who don't really want to talk to anybody until about 10 o'clock. And then once they're all set up and planned, they are good to go for the rest of the day, but they sit in these 7:30 early morning meetings going, I don't want to be here, just let me eat my coffee so I can wake up, please. So this, so many workplace tensions, this is where I want to touch on this piece. So much workplace tension comes from an early bird coming to a night owl first thing in the morning saying, hey, I've got this awesome new idea. And the night owl goes, I don't want to talk to you right now. Like, no, I don't have time and space for this. The early bird goes, what the hell is wrong with this person? As opposed to thinking, I've caught them at the wrong time, and their brain doesn't tolerate stress so well in the morning, but mine does. Instead, you end up with a 2-year feud between two people, all because there was a comment at the wrong time that had nothing wrong with the statement except that it caught this person at the wrong time, and they had the wrong expectation, and that we think that everybody is like us, and that is not the case. So, very important. You take this, school-based tension and you translate that to 2 years, you end up with someone who's maybe more prone to be anxious or is not fulfilled in their work because they don't get on with their colleagues, because they don't understand them, because this one thing happened, and this can lead to a state of demotivation and over time depression. These are things that matter, our social interactions, the differences that we have between us. If you find someone who's generally got a very delicate frame and you put them in front of the air conditioner, they will be shorter, sharper, snappier, less tolerant of you because they are genuinely cold. If they are cold, it actually stresses their physiology and they become less tolerant of other stresses, and people are a stress. We then have somebody who, if the air conditioning isn't on, they just get hot and bothered, they need that aircon on, or they just become intolerant and grumpy. The physical environment is changing. And now if you're sitting in a company and you've got a shared space and the air conditioning set to 23 and you're freezing, no wonder you don't like work so much and you dread it, and you've got 7 scarves on just to tolerate the people around you. But we don't put this down to a real thing. We just go, oh, it's really cold in here, it's bugging me. We don't think that that's going to influence our mental health, but it actually is. And it influences people in a different way. And then it comes to those people that just want their own quiet space, and those people who want open plan office and they get energized by people being around. If you put this very cold person into a very open plan office and you blow air conditioning at them, they'll want to leave. They will want to leave their work because they are not happy, because they cannot overcome the physiological response they're having to the environment. They might love the work, but all they want to do is go home and work by themselves in a nice warm environment. And that then disconnects them from their work colleagues. If their work colleagues aren't amenable to the fact that this person is maybe slightly more introverted and needs their own space to really get a lot of work done.
And cold.
And cold, exactly, yes. So,
which is very interesting, because I find I get my most work done early in the morning in a busy cafe. I would get more work done there than in a quiet office. Yeah. Quiet office kills me. Kills me.
The white noise, it's magic. Absolutely. And so what we have done over the last 2 decades is we've looked at how people are different and how these variables are actually different for different people. So much so that what we see over here is someone who is, based on their embryological development, and the science for this we can go into another time. Essentially, we have some individuals that are more, they are higher in adrenaline and they have greater amounts of testosterone sensitivity. What this does is it makes them very happy to get up first thing in the morning and fire on all cylinders and be an early bird. It also makes them more competitive. And if they have a role that isn't competitive, they get agitated and they start looking for problems. They also are a little bit quicker to communicate, particularly in the morning. And they tell you exactly what's on their mind, which doesn't always go down with everybody. Whereas we have another individual who is actually built very differently. They have a night owl physiology. They are more associated with serotonin levels, so they like to complete things. This adrenaline person over here likes to just start things and then drop them like they're hot 60% through. This person over here likes to pick things up in a system and then complete them really thoroughly because that makes them feel great. We also know that they only need 2 to 3 meals per day. This person needs 6. We know that this person does better with heavy weight training. This person does better with CrossFit. We know that, so what we understand now is that there's a pattern of development that actually relates to all of these factors that we've been talking about, that influences your communication, influences your workflow, influences your staff retention. If you don't give this person enough time to complete their task, they get stressed, they feel chaotic, and they want to leave. But they're also the most committed to your workplace because they like a long-term plan and being part of your organization for longer. We know that this person needs more variety and more challenge because adrenaline and testosterone demand it. And so they need to be challenged with their work at a macro level. You know, every year, a different position, a different task. Otherwise, they'll be looking for variety. And so this doesn't just work at a HR level, it works at a health level, and understanding what is this person's body driving towards and how does that work. And so when we're working with organizations, we've found these are the top 6 things as to why wellness programs don't work. They aren't personalized. We go, hey, everybody eat spinach and make sure you get veggies on your plate. And as a dietitian, I ran those sessions, but I now know that that's not the case. I know that there's people with kidney stones out there that shouldn't be eating lots of spinach. And this is that needs to be accounted for. We also know that some people need 6 meals per day versus 3. We know that some people need a very light dinner, others need a very heavy dinner. Some people need to exercise in the morning versus the afternoon. Some people love air conditioning, etc. We also know that people have a very incomplete understanding of mental health, and that is they're not accounting for the fact that it's the wrong time or the wrong temperature or the wrong food or the wrong kind of meeting setup, or the wrong kind of notice before a meeting, or the communication isn't about the right kind of thing. People aren't understanding that these things are factoring into a person's mental health. But when you then get into how do you assess that, normally you have executive health checks that cost thousands of dollars, and they're not scalable to go out to everybody with this level of detail. Often we see organizations being very reactive with their implementation. That is, we had something really go wrong, mental health issues, put a patch in place, get an EAP program on and EAP service on, and let's put a Band-Aid on this thing. Whereas we need to be preventative. And we also know the top one thing, even though it's number 5 here, is leader disengagement. If you wanted to improve a commercial outcome for your organization, you would train the leaders, you would create KPIs, you would make sure that the staff knew about it and had disciplinary action and consequences around them not doing that thing to make sure that the right commercial outcome was realized. Do we do that for wellness? Do we actually make it something that is leader-led? Do we make it rewarded? Do we build it into our organization so that we can give it a proper shot rather than just allow people to do it as they will? If you really want a company that's well, you need to lead it. And this is something that we spend a lot of time with leaders sort of doing this process so that we can really support that. And so the work that we do looks at how people are different, their genetics, how those genetics interact with the environment. We then are able to capture all of this data in the world's leading AI-driven platform called Shay. We're able to gather in 20 minutes your gene expression and understand all of the different individual components of what makes up you based on all of the things that we've discussed today. And there are no two profiles that are the same, and we can roll this out to a company of 10,000 in an hour session. We can have everybody up and running on the platform. And so this is where you're able to combine all of this information, understand the individual in a very, very specific way, and then be able to provide outputs that are actually relevant to the information, relevant to the individual, like exactly the types of vegetables you need, the types of meats that are going to be best, when you should eat those meats, when you should exercise to be in your best health. Essentially, it will go into a psychological profile based on your hormones and your genetics to say, hey, this person's more predisposed to being more competitive. Doesn't matter what environment that they're in, they'll be more competitive. Whereas this person over here, you can put them into a sales role with competition, they will not be competitive. They will want to be collaborative because that's the way their hormones actually drive safety for their body. And so we get not just this physical wellness, we also get the psychological wellness as well. The technology keeps pace with you. If you change, if your waist circumference comes down and your exercise levels go up and your stress levels drop, the profile will actually change to then match what you need in that moment. And this is where technology is able to capture all of this science. Like I'm sure you related to some of the information that I presented today on how people are different. We can capture that difference in 20 minutes, put it into this app, and then it will actually feed out the information to you in a way that is helping you align with your natural rhythms, with the best outputs for you. We're using this same platform with clinical supervision to reverse diabetes, heart disease. We've seen dramatic improvements in mental health, which I'll just demonstrate, or which I'll talk to you about right now. And this is just in the last 5 minutes. This is what we are seeing, what we're able to sort of recommend to individuals at a very high level. It gets a lot more specific than this. Essentially, John is told to wake up and go for a run and a swim. He's told to have a hearty breakfast, which is specific foods and nuts and seeds and grains that are appropriate for him. It then tells him what time his best peak productivity is. It then speaks to when's the best time for you to have a meeting with friends, and what's the best time for you to do your smaller, detailed, orientated tasks. When's the best time for you to rest mentally? When's the best time for you to go to bed? Are you more logical and linear and skeptical? You've got John in your room, you know he's going to be skeptical about everything that you say, and this is actually him being in good health, as opposed to John just being a pain in the bum. He's processing information in the way that's natural for him, and that's actually very important that he's able to exercise his skepticism. And if he's aware of that, then he can do it in a better way so that it doesn't offend people. Whereas Joan, she is designed to have a gradual start and have a light and digestible meal at the beginning, like a smoothie. Then plan and communicate, then get into she's actually cognitively most alert between 2 and 10. Lighter meal at night, She loves working in systems. She's great at pattern recognition, taking her time on decisions because of where she uses her brain. And so very different profiles, very different people, and it's able to be captured very, very quickly. So you can now have a real conversation with this person about their stress. And just by aligning with this, we see dramatic improvements in mental health. So where I'll finish is if you understand the biological makeup of an individual and how they're different, you're able to understand what creates physical wellness for them. You're able to understand mental health. You're able to understand their profile, their psychometric profile, and how their behavior is going to be driven. This then feeds into how you would lead that person, how you would communicate and create transparency and vulnerability and honesty within an organization. And so much so that it can even lead to, you've got someone who needs more challenge and more change. That's a HR consideration. And an app that actually changes with you as you change. You are not the same as when you were 6 months old, and you've got the same DNA within you. So your requirements are changing all of the time, and this is the technology that we now have access to is able to track that change and give you a meaningful suggestion on what is relevant for you right now. So with that, I'd love to open it up to questions for the panelists. Fire away.
Yeah, lots of questions. She's saying no, 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 no.
I had one question concerning privacy and how
Yes.
you keep that in your place, particularly with such personal data.
Absolutely. So an organization that gets this for their staff actually own the data. And the organization can't see the data unless the individual gives permission. So all of that is kept under incredibly tight lock and key. We have the highest level of encryption and data security with all of the various countries around the world. We're in 140 countries and we need to meet a lot of criteria to do that. So that protects the individual data from the rest of the team. What we find is that individuals want to share some high level information because it makes the communication piece so much easier. And we've run this with thousands of individuals, and the amount of high level information that can be shared has never posed a problem for any individual that we've worked with so far.
And what are some of the warning signs that you're seeing in organisations that they're not mentally healthy? I guess what are what are some practical steps that employers can take?
Yep. So the first thing, I guess, the biggest one is this. It's quite subjective, but it's actually very common, and that's when you say, "Hey, we've got a new project or a new thing," and people say, "I have to." There's a "I have to turn up to work" feeling. There's no extra motivation when something exciting happens. There's not a whole lot of excitement because they don't have the energy to actually engage in excitement, which actually costs a lot of energy. When there is a sprint that's required, no one's really putting up their hand for it. It's like essentially you will see a less engaged environment generally, because people will disengage when they're tired because they need to protect their own energy levels. And so if you're seeing more and more disengagement, which is then enhanced by the social isolation that's been relevant for many of us, that's one of the core signs, is you're just not getting the same kind of engagement. Second, if you were to take a quick straw poll of your leaders and ask them about their overload, and just ask, where are you sitting with your workload right now, and give me a rating of, up to my eyeballs or up to my chest. If you're getting leaders who are saying eyeballs and above, then you know that stress is going to be transferring onto the individuals below them as well. And so I'd be pulse checking your leaders. And then, there's going to be commercial outcomes that result from this too. And so if you're seeing productivity go down and KPIs not being met, it's going to be because people don't have the gas. So, there are other ways that we can measure these things. You can get quite objective with, the depression, anxiety scores and various things like that. But that subjective nature of less engagement, less energy for all the good and the bad, and the change is very costly. And to energy levels. So people who are low on energy, which is the real start of this whole process, that's going to be a good marker. And so the second part of the question was, what can we do about it? Generally, people need connection. Everything that we're doing here is allowing a person to be seen for who they are, and allowing a person to know who they are. I know I'm competitive and I'm good with it. I actually lean into my competitiveness so that I can get more out of myself. I know that I like to take time on things and I'm not competitive and I'm good with it. And my competitive colleague over here knows that I'm no good for a competition, but knows that I'm super reliable for things that are non-competitive. Essentially, that can be discovered very quickly biologically. But even if you were to operate with the lens that, hey, I've got people here that might have different preferences and are good at different things, and their work may not be completely matched to their natural strengths. I wonder what their strengths are. If you started having that conversation and started asking people, what do you how do you feel about this, and actually starting to understand and hear them, you add that to some group activities where people are engaging, you'll start to see a lift in that. As people feel seen and heard, they start to feel safer, which then obviously creates less stress. But then at the same time, one of the easiest things that we institute into our organizations that we work with is a 2-minute breathing break at the start of a meeting, where everyone, they put on some meditative music that they've all agreed to or something like that, and they just go through a 2-minute meditation. And it could be just deep breathing, and all that does is just washes away the stress from before, resets them in the now, and then at the last couple of minutes, all they've got to do mentally is just set an intention of what would I like out of this meeting and how can I support the people in the room. They come with fresh eyes. And if you do that just before you get home at the end of the night, it just completely changes the level of appreciation you have for your family. If you can just sort of set that little air buffer between work and home, that little breath, and just say, what am I at home for? Again, oh, that's right, I've got these people that I need to raise into decent humans and not show them that yelling is a good thing. It's taking a breathing break. It's such a fascinating thing that people feel very vulnerable doing a breathing break in front of people. And so there's like a weirdness about it, but there is so much hard science on if you breathe slowly, it significantly improves your stress levels. And it's one of the fastest ways that you can get re-engagement of a brain that would otherwise be distracted. So that'd be the couple of things that I'd start with.
Okay. Mary's just got a COVID question, I think.
I was just wondering, that line, that delineation between work and home that used to exist and was so important for people. They went from the working environment and the stresses to, hey, I'm home now. I am with my family. I zen. That's totally blurred.
Yes.
Because you become one. And I know from speaking to some people, that's become a bit confronting as they're going back to the workplace. How can you refresh that change, I suppose, in working day between work and getting back home again?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, what I've noticed in the organisations we're working with right now is that there can actually be some levels of anxiety and worry about going back into the workplace. There's a sense of concern, or what is it going to be? It might be risk of infection. It might be just being around people again, when they've been, particularly in Sydney where there was such a hard lockdown for so long, and I guess Melbourne is the same thing. So if you're working at home, it helps very much to have some sort of routine that creates that air buffer in between work day and home day. Even if you're doing some home related things throughout the day, if you're out on the dining table, having a process where you set up and then pack down so that it no longer looks like a workstation, like just having that clear delineated mark between start and finish of the day. It could be, I used to walk home from work. It's like maybe when you finish work, you go for that walk around the block and you still, bring in that behavior. Maybe it's even putting a diary entry into your workplace to say, into your calendar to say, this is the 20 minutes that I'm going to use to pack up and, maybe call someone at work and have a bit of one of those work-related chats that you have on the way out, when you're having a bit of social nit-nat, like bringing in a behavior like that and programming it in, because we're all slaves to our Zoom or Teams diary these days. But if you put it in there, it creates that buffer zone. It just gives you some structure, because the biggest thing about the fluidity at home is exactly that. It becomes very fluid, and that's where you start getting confused. And unless you're a person, there are some people out there that are predisposed to this that would actually prefer it to work all day long, and they have no problem melding those two worlds. Unless you're like that, which is the minority, then it's important you set up those structures. And then I would say that those people who are coming back into their work, there'll be different components that are actually stressing you or creating a little bit of strain. And it's worth sitting with that and thinking, what is the thing that is driving this stress? And then talk to somebody about it. You know, talk to somebody who knows and trusts you, and just express it. Sometimes just being seen and heard, like, this is not a foreign environment. We've been to work before, but when we're disassociated from it, it can create that little bit of stress with the unknown. And so if you're just running circles around your brain, then I would sit with it and say, right, what is it? Is it that I'm worried that I won't be able to do the same kind of things? Am I worried that there's going to be too much intensity at work? Am I worried that I'm going to be under too much accountability in front of my boss, whatever it might be? Have a think about what that actually is, rather than just stay in stress. You know, go for a walk, get your mind clear, have a think about what this is so that you can start discussing it. And obviously, there are health professionals that can support you navigate that far better than what I've just done there too. And so I would strongly recommend, if that is a concern for you, then reach out to the appropriate help so that you can get that.
No. Well, that was awesome. Thank you very much. I just had a look, and we don't have any questions from the floor. This last question call. I feel like an auctioneer here. So we might close it there. So thank you very much for your time. I guess if people want more information about your app, where can they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best thing to do actually would be to email Sean. If you're looking for interaction there, it's Sian.Stimson, SIAN.Stimson, STIMSON at ShaeWellness.com. So we'll maybe we can put that on the notes for the. Well, actually, no, we may not make that super public. But yeah, very good. So that's the email address if you've got more questions. And then through that channel, we can support you with anything you may need, from workshops right through to full programs, leadership things, retreats, offsites, anything where there are humans, we can support you with.
No, that was very interesting. Thank you. Really
No problem.
Good.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Any other last questions? No? Excellent. Okay, then. See you later.
See you later.
Thanks for listening to our latest webinar. Remember, if you ever need any HR help or support, please reach out.